A silent studio. A single light cuts through the dark. A young man, barely 23, stands before a blank canvas, brush trembling in his hand. Then, with one stroke, red explodes. A heartbeat on canvas. Not just color, a pulse, a cry, a history too long ignored. It's 1941. America is divided, bruised by its own reflection. And here he is, Jacob Lawrence, a young black artist from Harlem, daring to paint what no museum wall had ever shown. Not kings, not cathedrals, but people, workers, mothers, dreamers, carrying their lives in suitcases, their hope packed between fear and survival. Listen closer, you can almost hear it. The whistle of a train bound north. The shuffle of feet leaving the South behind. The rhythm of jazz echoing through narrow Harlem streets, each note whispering, "We are here." Lawrence's brush moved like a journalist, like a witness. Every color was a headline. Every stroke, a memory of migration, of chains broken and new ones forged in the city's glare. Museums didn't know what to make of it. These bold blocks of color, these unapologetic faces staring back. It wasn't polite. It wasn't quiet. It was truth, painted in primary colors. He didn't just paint art. He painted a revolution. 60 panels, a nation in motion. And with them, he forced America to look at the people it had tried to forget. But here's the haunting part. Decades later, when the noise faded and the world moved on, his colors began to disappear from the spotlight. The brush that captured America's hidden heartbeat was almost erased from its memory. How could that happen? How could the art that told the story of freedom vanish into silence? And who decided which colors history was allowed to remember? Imagine Harlem in the 1930s. Smoke curling from rooftops, jazz spilling out of basement clubs, laughter and struggle sharing the same air. The trains keep arriving, one after another, filled with families carrying everything they own in battered suitcases. They've come from the cotton fields of Georgia, the swamps of Louisiana, the red dirt roads of Alabama. They're chasing something that sounds simple but feels impossible: dignity. The Great Migration has redrawn America's soul. Millions leaving the South, heading north to cities that promise freedom but deliver crowded tenements and closed doors. Harlem becomes the heartbeat of a new era, electric, hungry, alive. A place where poets, dancers, and dreamers collide. A place that could break you or make you immortal. And somewhere inside a small apartment, a boy sits near a cracked window, sketching the world he sees. His name is Jacob Lawrence, born in Atlantic City, raised by Harlem's fire. He doesn't have fancy brushes or fine paper, just scraps, grocery bags, anything that can hold color. But what he sees, no one else is painting. He watches his neighbors march to protests, mothers sewing late into the night, fathers too proud to bend even when they're starving. These are his lessons. His teachers aren't professors. They're janitors, street preachers, barbers, and women who built worlds out of nothing. They are survivors, and through their eyes, he learns what strength really looks like. In a world that tells him he doesn't belong, art becomes his rebellion. Each sketch a whisper against silence. Each color a defiance against the gray of the Great Depression. He doesn't just want to draw, he wants to document, to capture the invisible lives around him before the world forgets. But here's the question that burns behind his every brushstroke. Could a young black man, in a country that refuses to see him, dare to paint the story of America and be allowed to show it? Picture this. A brush dips into deep blue, then ochre, then red. Colors that don't just fill a canvas, they bleed into it. It's Harlem, 1940. The air smells of coal and possibility. In a cramped studio, a 23-year-old Jacob Lawrence leans over a table lined with wooden panels. 60 of them. He isn't painting dreams or landscapes. He's painting truth. The Great Migration. Millions of African Americans fleeing the South, escaping lynch mobs, poverty, the silence of segregation. He paints them boarding trains under gray skies. He paints their prayers whispered under flickering station lights. He paints their faces, tired, determined, unbreakable. Each brushstroke is a heartbeat. Each color a declaration. Blue for endurance, red for blood and resilience, yellow for the sliver of hope that refuses to die. He works with the rhythm of a preacher, the urgency of a witness. No gallery commission, no wealthy patrons, just a young man trying to make the world see what it had spent generations trying to hide. When people finally walk into the room to see the Migration series, they don't know what to say. The panels are small, but together they feel massive. They move like film stills, each one a frame in a story too painful and too proud to look away from. Lawrence doesn't give you comfort. He gives you confrontation. The lines are sharp, the angles tense. His people are not victims. They are travelers crossing America's deepest wound. And for the first time, history looks back through the eyes of those who lived it. Through color, not chains. Through dignity, not despair. But here's the twist. When the series debuted, critics called it primitive. Museums hesitated. Some whispered that it was too political, too raw, too real. The country loved its art soft, abstract, not bleeding with truth. And Jacob Lawrence had just held up a mirror that America wasn't ready to face. Because behind every brushstroke was a question it couldn't escape. What happens when a nation finally sees itself and doesn't like what it sees? Imagine this, a young artist, barely out of his 20s, standing in a white-walled gallery. His paintings, vibrant, defiant, unapologetically black, hang under lights that were never meant to shine on him. But look closer. Behind the applause, there's unease. The year is 1941. Jacob Lawrence has just done the unthinkable. His Migration series, 60 panels of color and courage, has been purchased by the Museum of Modern Art and the Phillips Collection. For the first time in American history, the walls of MoMA tell a black story. Workers, families, dreamers on trains heading north. A revolution hidden in plain sight. But outside those museum doors, whispers begin. Critics tilt their heads, curators purse their lips. They call it folk art, naive, not fine art, not universal. Because how could the story of black migration, of pain and perseverance, belong beside Van Gogh or Picasso? The art world, built on marble and manners, didn't know what to do with him. To them, Lawrence wasn't just a painter, he was a problem. A reminder that beauty could come from struggle, that history could bleed color. And so they clapped, politely. They smiled, carefully. They celebrated him, as long as his art didn't cut too deep. But Jacob Lawrence didn't paint to please. He painted to reveal. Every brushstroke a mirror to America's conscience. Every color a confession. And in that tension between acceptance and truth, he stood alone. Picture him walking out of the museum that night, the crowd behind him fading into the hum of the city. He should have felt triumph. Instead, he felt distance between the praise and the purpose. Because he knew what they didn't want to admit. They loved his work because it was beautiful. They feared it because it was true. And in a world that had finally opened its doors to him, Jacob Lawrence had to wonder, was fame his freedom or his new prison? The war is over. The soldiers have come home. But the battle for America's soul is just beginning. The streets hum with protest, signs lifted high, voices demanding justice. It's the late 1940s, a nation drunk on victory, yet poisoned by its own reflection. And in the middle of it all stands Jacob Lawrence. He's famous now. His paintings hang in museums, his name whispered in the same breath as legends. But with fame comes a price. Visibility without protection. Because the same country that praised his art for its truth still refused to live by it. The civil rights movement is stirring, racial tension tightening like a noose around every conversation. The McCarthy era begins its witch hunts, searching for enemies within. Fear is currency, suspicion is power. And for a black artist who painted struggle and defiance, both are deadly weights. Lawrence retreats to his studio, his sanctuary, and his battlefield. He paints through the noise, through the headlines, through the ache. But the colors begin to change. The reds grow heavier, the blues colder. The rhythm that once felt like jazz now sounds like mourning. In 1949, the pressure finally cracks him open. He checks himself into a mental hospital, not out of weakness, but from exhaustion. The weight of a divided nation has seeped into his bones. But even there, surrounded by silence, steel beds, and fluorescent lights, he can't stop painting. He paints confinement, stillness, the quiet dignity of those who have nothing left but their humanity. Every line trembles with empathy, not madness. He sees beauty in brokenness and turns pain into language. Imagine him there, a man stripped of everything but his vision. Even in the walls meant to contain him, he finds freedom. Even in his lowest moment, he paints life back into existence. But as the outside world burns, one question lingers in the echo of his heartbeat. After all he's given, the color, the courage, the truth, will Jacob Lawrence ever find peace in the world he tried to change? A man stands before a blank canvas once more. Older now, quieter, but still burning with the same fire that never quite went out. The 1960s have arrived, and America is shifting again. The marches, the speeches, the violence, the hope. A nation tearing itself apart to be reborn. Jacob Lawrence returns, not as the young prodigy, but as a survivor. He's teaching now, guiding a new generation at the University of Washington. In his classroom, the air hums with questions bigger than paint. He tells his students, art must witness, art must feel. And when he picks up a brush again, his subjects are no longer just faces. They're foundations, builders, teachers, rebels. The ones who hold the country together while it pretends not to notice them. His Builders series glows with quiet defiance. Men and women lifting beams, stitching, repairing, creating order from chaos. They are America's hands. And he paints them with reverence, as if saying, "You kept this country standing when no one thanked you." Then there's the War series. No glory, no flags, just human eyes staring into the cost of conflict. He doesn't paint victory, he paints survival. Because Jacob Lawrence understands, history doesn't move in triumphs, it moves in wounds that heal slowly. Picture his self-portrait. The gaze steady, the colors controlled, but alive. He has outlived the critics, outlasted the labels. He's no longer asking permission to belong, he already does. In interviews, he speaks softly, but his words cut deep. My pictures express the American scene, he says. Not the white American scene, nor the black American scene, but the real American scene. And in that moment you realize, his art was never about division. It was about truth, about the colors that exist between pain and pride. Every stroke a testimony, every shade a heartbeat. The music fades, silence lingers. The camera drifts across his canvases, reds, golds, blues still burning like coals. Because even after all the years, all the struggle, Jacob Lawrence never stopped painting America. He just painted the version that history refused to see. But here's the question that hangs in the quiet. When the colors fade and the lights dim, will the nation he painted ever truly see him? A museum bathed in quiet light. Rows of paintings stretch across the walls. Reds, blues, ochres frozen in motion. Children stand before them, whispering, tracing the shapes of people who once fled the South for something better. The air hums with silence, the kind of silence that feels like respect and regret. It's the year 2000. Jacob Lawrence has passed away. The boy from Harlem who once painted on brown paper bags is gone. His journey from the chaos of the Great Depression to the heart of American art is complete. The man who captured the pulse of migration has now joined the stillness of history. His paintings hang in the very galleries that once refused to see them. The same institutions that called his work folk now call it foundational. And yet, there's a haunting truth beneath the praise. Fame fades, even for the ones who changed everything. The crowds move on. The lights dim. The stories begin to gather dust. Time, after all, is the most ruthless critic. It remembers what it wants and forgets what it fears. Lawrence painted the movement of a people, their hunger, their heartbreak, their courage. But how many of us still say his name? How many still stand before those 60 panels and feel the journey they tell? A slow pan across the migration series. A train, a suitcase, a mother's hand holding her child. The same motion, the same question. Because this was never just about art. It was about memory, about a nation forced to see the faces it had turned away from. And as the piano fades into silence, one thought lingers, fragile and heavy. What happens to a country that forgets its painters and the truth they dared to put in color? Imagine this: a brick wall on a city corner. Spray cans hiss, colors bloom. A new generation paints, bold, fearless, unfiltered. Faces of protest, murals of hope, stories too heavy for silence. Somewhere in those strokes, in those wild splashes of red and gold, Jacob Lawrence is still alive. His spirit hums through every artist who refuses to look away, through every hand that dares to turn struggle into beauty, through every brush that says, "We are still here." From Harlem to Houston, From Lagos to London, his legacy moves like rhythm, unstoppable. It's in the walls, in the streets, in the classrooms where young artists learn his name and whisper, "He painted us." He made color speak when words weren't enough. He made history visible and human. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it. The heartbeat in his palette. The echo of migration trains in the hum of the city. The same story, just told in new shades. Because Jacob Lawrence didn't just paint history. He painted truth. He painted us. And maybe, just maybe, we still haven't learned from the colors he left behind. Fade to black.